Welcome all. Now we will be discussing about diabetic ketoacidosis, one of the most common diabetic emergencies which can be seen in emergency room. Diabetic ketoacidosis, by definition, patient can have insulinopenia, that insulin deficiency that leads to hyperglycemia. This hyperglycemia can lead to dehydration, osmotic diuresis and dehydration, and acidosis. Ketone bodies can be positive. High blood sugar more than 300 milligram per deciliter, low bicarbonate less than 15 milliequivalents per liter, acidosis pH less than 7.3, ketone bodies can be positive. This is the diagnostic feature of diabetic ketoacidosis. Now the triad of DKA we already discussed: hyperglycemia, very high sugar, severe dehydration, 6 to 8 liters of fluid deficiency. Ketone bodies are positive with severe metabolic acidosis. Causes are mainly infections, UTI, pneumonia, sepsis. Inadequate insulin doses. Skipping of doses are one of the most common cause for DKA. Myocardial infarction, stroke, pregnancy, alcohol ingestion. These are the common causes. Now you can see this chart. Ketone bodies are produced in our body when there is insulin deficiency or in stress. Patient can also develop dehydration. Altogether, patient can have high blood sugar, dehydration, ketone bodies positive, ketoacidosis that may lead to altered behavior and coma. Now the symptoms are, main symptoms, most of the patient may be in altered behavior, dehydration. Many patients may complain about severe abdominal pain. Patient can have associated lethargy, loss of volume, other features like myocardial infarction, stroke features, and patient on examination you can get air hunger, that is called as Kussmaul's breathing. It's a part of acidosis. Smell of acetone can be there, hypothermia can be there, hypotension can be there. Ultimately patient develops altered behavior, confusion and coma. Then we can call it as diabetic coma. One of the most close differential diagnosis of DKA is HHS. The problem in HHS is, again, insulin deficiency is there, but patient does not develop ketone bodies. So acidosis part is not there, but the volume loss is severe. Volume loss is more than 8 to 9 liters, whereas in DKA it is 6 to 8 liters. So here the volume loss is very high. So that is a major difference from DKA to HHS. You can see the difference between DKA and HHS. The major difference is the ketone bodies are positive in DKA, volume deficit is more in HHS, and ketone bodies are negative in HHS. Otherwise, the treatment part for both are same. Now we can see the deficits in DKA and HHS. DKA, it is 6 liters of fluid loss from the body. It's due to osmotic diuresis. Then potassium deficit is very high. Patient can lose potassium through kidneys, or patient can have shift hypokalemia. Both are possible. Other deficiencies are like patient can have hyponatremia. Mostly it is false hyponatremia because of high blood sugar. Falsely low sodium can be there. Then hypophosphatemia, hypomagnesemia, hypocalcemia can be there. But the most important deficits are fluid deficit, 6 liters, potassium deficit also can be there. The most important investigation in emergency room for DKA is somebody come with high blood sugar whose ketone bodies are positive. Then you have to do some more investigation. We can take a ABG level. ABG shows metabolic acidosis. High anion gap metabolic acidosis is most common. Instead of ABG, if you want to avoid a arterial prick, we can go for venous sample also. That will give pH. The difference between arterial pH and venous pH is negligible. For managing DKA, venous pH also enough. So ABG is not needed in a isolated DKA. It can be useful in ABG, like DKA with pneumonia, DKA with respiratory infections. It may be useful. So blood sugar can be done initially every hourly. Then on treatment, once the patient is stabilized, then it can be measured every fourth hourly. Normally, we can take initial finger stick glucose. Once patient is in ICU, it is better to do one sample at least in lab, and monitoring can be done in glucometer itself. Continuous monitoring can be done in glucometer itself. Initial value, lab value will be needed in all the patients. Now, in other investigations, like whenever patient is having DKA or HHS, there will be a volume loss from the patient. Large amount of volume can be lost from the body that can elevate urea and creatinine. Disproportionate elevation of urea than creatinine, that is very important. Normally in renal failure, the urea and creatinine proportionately elevate, but in pre-renal failure like DKA and all, there will be disproportionate elevation of urea than creatinine. So high urea is very important. Creatinine also can be elevated because of secondary renal disorder or diabetic nephropathy. And sodium is falsely reduced when during the correction of blood sugar. It can come back to normal mostly. Osmolality can be calculated to know whether it is DKA or HHS. But remember, very simple, if the patient is having high blood sugar and if the sodium is not reduced, that means sodium is either normal or slightly elevated, always think about HHS. So that is very important. In volume loss, large volume loss, urea and sodium can be elevated. So that's why you look at the sodium. If it is low, it can be HHS itself, DKA itself. If it is slightly higher, then you have to suspect HHS, but you can calculate the osmolality here. We have given the formula here. 2 into sodium plus potassium plus glucose plus urea. That will give the osmolality. Then most of the infections, patient can have a high WBC count. Procalcitonin can be done to screen for infections. Chest X-ray can be done. Urine routine culture can be done. These are the routine investigations should be done. All patients with DKA, we should evaluate for myocardial infarction. ECG should be taken in all patients. Now, other investigation like we already discussed, infection screen should be done. We have to take routine blood counts, procalcitonin, blood culture, urine culture, chest X-ray, like that infection screen should be done. Then many patients can have abdominal pain, so we can suspect pancreatitis in this patient. But many patients with DKA, amylase alone can be elevated. That doesn't give a diagnostic clue for pancreatitis. Both amylase and lipase should be elevated. Then only we can make a diagnosis of pancreatitis. So patients with DKA can have a elevated amylase with abdominal pain. That does not give a diagnosis of pancreatitis. We should have lipase also elevated. Now, once we diagnose DKA, that means very high blood sugar, severe volume loss and hypokalemia. The first one to be corrected is volume loss. So dehydration should be corrected first. So we can put 2 IV lines, start normal saline. The normal saline should be administered in a rate of 7 to 14 ml per kg per hour. So normal saline can be started. First 1 liter should be given in first 30 minutes. Then next 1 hour we can give 1 more liter. Next 2 hours 1 more liter can be given. Then next 1 liter can be given 2 to 4 hours. Next 2 to 4 hours. So total deficit should be corrected over 24 hours. So there is no requirement for rapid correction unless patient is having a severe hypotensive attack. We can correct like this. So first 1 liter in 30 minutes, second 1 liter in next 1 hour, third 1 liter in next 2 hours, fourth 1 liter in 2 to 4 hours. Remaining 2 liters can be given in next 24 hours. But remember, when we are giving fluids, check for fluid status of the patient, check for urine output. Always auscultate in the lungs for pulmonary edema. Some patients can develop pulmonary edema during this treatment because they can already have a cardiac failure. So rapid fluid infusion can precipitate pulmonary edema. So always monitor the patient when we are giving fluids. When the sugar drops to 250 milligram per deciliter, start dextrose. 5% dextrose infusion can be started. This is to avoid hypoglycemia, but in children this can avoid cerebral edema also. So cerebral edema is one of the common complication of decay management, fluid decay management in children, but it is not very well explained in adult patients. Here we are starting dextrose to avoid severe hypoglycemic episodes. So fluid requirement in DK is 6 liters in first day, but whereas in HHS it is slightly higher. 8 to 9 liters should be given in first day itself because their fluid deficit is more than DKA. So during the correction of fluid itself, patient can develop some amount of decrease in sugars, and sodium can become normal. The hypernatremia in HHS can become normal because we are giving fluids, so dilution can reduce the sodium levels. Like that, we can see the improvement. Deficit is somewhere around 500 to 700 milliequivalent. That should be corrected if possible, but we can see the lab values. If serum potassium is less than 3.5, give 40 milliequivalents of potassium through peripheral lines. If you need to give more than 40 milliequivalents, we have to put a central line, and through that we can give. So give potassium in 1 liter fluid because patient is having fluid deficit. So add 40 milliequivalents to one side. Other side we can give regular normal saline boluses. On one side of hand we can give potassium containing solution. Okay. So that is very important to correct potassium first itself if there is hypokalemia before starting insulin. That is very important. Before starting insulin, we have to correct the potassium deficit, at least make it normal, then only start insulin. Otherwise, during the initial phase of insulin, patient can further develop further severe hypokalemia and complications. That is because of shift hypokalemia induced by insulin. Now, once we correct both hypovolemia and hypokalemia, we can start insulin. So normally when we are there is a protocol called as Delta protocol by Yale University. You can see the protocol afterwards, but here I am telling a simple version. So whenever the blood sugar is 500 or 600, you can give at least 10 units initially as a continuous infusion, 10 units per hour infusion, or 10 units bolus can be given, then continue infusion. If initial 10 units is over, 1 hour is over, we check the blood sugar. If the blood sugar is high, double the dose, make it 20 units per hour. If the blood sugar is coming down, then see what is the blood sugar. Suppose the blood sugar is 500, initially it was 600, we started 10 units per hour or 10 units bolus and 10 units infusion started. After 1 hour, if it is 400 units, 400 by 100, it will give the insulin infusion rate. So you can make it 4 units per hour. Continue 4 units per hour for 1 hour. Check the blood sugar. If it is same or high, double the dose. If it is coming down to 300 milligram per deciliter, 300 by 100 will give 3 units. Now like that you can reduce the dose, but if the sugar is same or high, double the dose. But a better explanation is given in Yale University's Delta protocol. You can refer Delta protocol after that. It will be difficult to explain in a slide that Delta protocol. So I am not discussing that. So this is the simplest method. Blood sugar by 100 will give you the infusion rate, but initial dose is 10 units per hour or 10 units bolus and continue 10 units per hour. So once the blood sugar drops to less than 250, you have to start dextrose infusion along with your fluid correction. That is to avoid hypoglycemia in an adult patient and avoid brain edema in a child. Again, blood sugar checking is got importance in DKA management. So every hourly you can check initially. Then once the patient is stabilized, you can reduce the time to every 4 hours or every 6 hours, depending on the severity. But initially, till the patient's sugars are controlled, every hour will be better. We can do the finger stick method, or initially we can send a sample to lab along with HbA1c, because HbA1c is very important. We should know whether this patient is having high blood sugar since last 1 or 2 months or is first time. Many patients who are coming to emergency room with DKA may be presenting to department first time, because they have undetected high blood sugar and suddenly now coming with DK with some infection or sepsis. So HbA1c also will be very good investigation initially. So send a sample to lab, normal blood sugar and HbA1c, and in ICU we can use glucometer. Continuous monitoring glucometer can be used. The expected drop of blood sugar should be 50 to 75 milligram deciliter per hour. That is enough. Suppose the sugar is 700 now, after starting the fluid for 1 hour or after starting the insulin infusion for 1 hour, next hour the blood sugar should drop to 625. That's all. We no need to overcorrect this blood sugar, because overcorrection can again produce brain edemas and complications. So, during the treatment, some patients can develop hypoglycemia. If the patient develops hypoglycemia, better stop the insulin infusion for temporarily and continue with dextrose infusion. Then once the sugars are maintaining, then we can start insulin infusion. The protocol is like this: if the blood sugar is less than 50, that is a dangerous level, stop insulin infusion, administer 1 ampule, 25 gram dextrose IV should be given. If the blood sugar is 50 to 74, stop insulin, administer half ampule. Then if the blood sugar is 75 to 99, stop insulin alone, recheck blood sugar after 15 minutes. If the blood sugar reaches more than 90, then again blood sugar should be checked. Then we can start insulin infusion at 75% of the previous rate. Never abruptly stop insulin infusion, because that can produce complications in a DKA patients. DKA can again precipitate due to this maneuver. So never stop the infusion abruptly. There is a protocol to stop the infusion also. Now, some physicians prefer to correct the acidosis part with bicarbonate, but that is not indicated routinely in DKA patients, because the problem in DKA is dehydration and insulinopenia induced acidosis. So temporarily correcting this acidosis is not good. We can correct the fluid deficit and hyperglycemia with fluids and insulin. But rarely, if the patient is in shock or severe acidosis or acidosis induced cardiac failure, respiratory failure, or severe hyperkalemia, like a patient who is having renal failure, hyperkalemia, DKA, in that type of patients we can give soda bicarb. Soda bicarb dose is 400 ml in NS, 400 ml NS with 20 milliequivalents of 100 milliequivalents of soda bicarb in 100 ml of 400 ml of normal saline with potassium. If there is no hyperkalemia, should be infused. Now, other supportive therapies or other supportive treatment are catheterization. Urinary catheterization should be done to know the urine output. An nasogastric tube should be placed. Patient should start NG tube feeding. Central line is required in most of the patients who is admitted in ICU. Plasma expanders are not required unless until we correct the intravascular volume with normal saline. Even after it is persisting, then we can give plasma expander like albumin. Only albumin is recommended. Antibiotics must be given for infection. Magnesium and phosphate should be corrected. Sodium will get corrected in most of the time. Once we correct the diabetic part, sodium will be corrected. Now, the common complications of DK are lactic acidosis because of infection, sepsis, severe dehydration. Lactic acidosis can be there. That may be corrected during your fluid therapy. Cerebral edema can be there in patients who is having DK and rapid correction of blood sugar. That can occur in some patients, especially in young children. That should be avoided. ARDS can present in patients who is having sepsis. Pulmonary edema also can occur during fluid correction. Arterial and venous thromboembolism can be there. DIC can occur in some patients. Shock can occur. And rebound ketoacidosis can occur if you stop the insulin infusion suddenly. So remember, insulin infusion should not be stopped abruptly. So even if the blood sugar is 100, if the patient does not have hypoglycemic symptoms, till the ketone bodies in serum is positive, we have to continue insulin infusion. Urine ketone bodies can be seen in some patients, may or may not be seen. So they are not good investigation, but in peripheral settings, urine ketones can be taken into consideration. But till the serum ketones are negative, we have to continue insulin infusion. Once we see that ketone bodies are negative, then calculate the total dose requiring for this patient. See what is the dose given for last 24 hours. Suppose it is 100 units. So 100 units can be divided into 3 parts, like 30, 30, 30. Regular insulin that can be given. Regular insulin 30, 30, 30 can be given in a day. But remember, before stopping the insulin infusion, you have to give first dose of insulin subcutaneous. So we don't give subcutaneous in a patient who is in dehydrated state. That's why we are giving insulin infusion. We should give only regular insulin as infusion, not mix type of insulin. So regular insulin was started for infusion. Now we are switching to repeated doses, that is regular insulin should be given at least half an hour before stopping the infusion. Once patient is ready to take oral feeds also, we can start subcutaneous insulins. So 3 important things: ketone bodies has to be negative, dehydration should be corrected, third one, patient should be ready to take oral feeds, whether it is through Ryle's tube or per oral, that should be ready. Then we can start subcutaneous insulin. Start only regular insulin, whether it is an analog insulin or a routine conventional insulin, should be started as infusion, initially regular insulin, then switch to subcutaneous regular insulins. Now you can remember DKA management with this simple mnemonic: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N. Airway, breathing, circulation should be taken care in all patients. Diabetic history, blood sugar values should be taken. HbA1c will be a very good tool. Electrolytes, potassium, pH should be taken. Fluid management, glucose monitoring, hypokalemia should be corrected. Insulin infusion can be started. JVP should be monitored in all patients who is having fluid infusion. Ketone bodies should be observed. Lower dose of insulin to be continued till we start the fixed dose. Monitor blood pressure, pulse, oxygen saturation, mental status, fluid status, output every day.